This is Gravitas. King Donald's first 100 days may be nothing to write home about. The American public appears disillusioned already. His allies are nervous, while in India the mood is uncertain given his saber-rattling over outsourcing.
100 days into his presidency, and Donald Trump has the lowest public approval rating since 1945. A CNN ORC poll showed only 44% of Americans approve of his performance so far, 54% disapprove. Critics say Trump has spent too much time antagonizing political opponents. He's not even halfway through recruiting the right people for his administration. There are widespread suspicions about his Russian connections, and the economy is yet to show any significant growth. On foreign policy, he's had nothing really to show. He thrashed NATO only to backtrack, threatened China only to backtrack again, made friendly noises to Moscow and then fired missiles into Syria with no discernible broader strategy. Donald Trump has sent a carrier battle group to the Korean peninsula and threatened the worst. He has not articulated any vision for South Asia, although his moves to tighten H-1B visas and reduce outsourcing have raised concerns in India. South Bloc should get some clarity about the Washington relationship only after Narendra Modi's visit in the next few months. Bureau Report, WION.
Joining us from California this evening, Stephen Golub, international affairs expert. Good evening, Stephen. On the scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate Donald Trump's first 100 years in office?
Good question. I'll answer that in two ways quickly. And it's a pleasure to be here, by the way. In terms of substantive accomplishments, perhaps a 3, in that he's achieved some minor matters. Well, to many of us, they'd be considered damage along the lines of what you sketched in the introduction. In terms of environmental policy, some very, very negative accomplishments there that some of us would consider damaging to the country. And in some other matters regarding civil rights, regarding immigration policies, even though he's failed in some respects, he's made a bit of progress. He's come around a bit to be more moderate in terms of some foreign policy matters, even as he's done saber rattling. So on balance, a negative rating, but not totally negative. But this is the respect in which I unfortunately would rate him a 10. His two main accomplishments are that he, from his own point of view, in terms of his own interest, he's been able to play down the crucial matter of what could be damaging or undermining U.S. democracy, of the ties that his campaign had to Russian interference with our election. So that's number one. And number two, he's in a sense begun to normalize extraordinary levels of corruption that we would not see in many developed or advanced economies or growing economies, but in terms of family ties, in terms of special interests that are tied to him, even in terms of his daughters and his firm's economic interests, he's begun to normalize that somewhat. So in a sense, in terms of accomplishments by his own standards of minimizing the Russian scandal and minimizing corruption, at least for the time being, I'd unfortunately, very regrettably, score him a 10.
Unfortunately, regrettably, give him a 10. That makes for a very interesting report card. Do you think he's also learning on the job?
No. Well, let me qualify that a bit. He's learning in the sense that he does have a few people around him who know what they're doing. Now, some people in the U.S. might disagree with his national security advisor, defense secretary, in terms of their policy positions, but at least they're competent at these positions. I think he's learned a bit from them. And that is a good thing, you know, and that accounts for some of his reversals. On the other hand, some of what he's learned has been totally wrong. You know, in talking with President Xi of China, he got a 10-minute lesson on Chinese-Korean history that was absolutely wrong, that appalled the Koreans when Trump came away from that conversation saying, oh, Korea was once part of China. I hadn't realized that. I learned a lot. That's appalling to the Koreans. It should be appalling to the world community. It would reflect how little he knows about India, when Mr. Modi goes to meet with him, don't be surprised about how little Mr. Trump knows going into that meeting. But more generally, to answer your question, the reason I gave a very firm no is that he's not even capable, I think, of learning much. He's very set in his ways, not by virtue of his age, but by virtue of his personality, what's worked for him for many years, that he has a documented, incredibly short attention span. And what he does learn is from cable news or from tweets that he forwards. So the bottom line with those caveats I included is no, he has not really learned very much at all, and that's not a good thing.
Okay, and he just gave an interview to Reuters to mark the first 100 days in office, and one of the things he said was that I never imagined the presidency would mean so much work. What is the biggest challenge you think he faces now?
The challenges, well, substantively, the biggest challenge he faces in terms of foreign policy is North Korea. And that would be the case of any president. That is a legitimately dangerous situation. As I've suggested, I don't think he's up to handling it well, and I'm hoping fervently that his advisors will steer him in the right direction. In terms of politically, well, it does get back a bit to what I said about this whole matter of the Russian scandal, Russian interference in U.S. elections. It's a challenge for him, but it's really a challenge for the country. So it's a challenge for him to handle politically, but in terms of the threat to our democracy, what it means long term, not just to the U.S., but Russian efforts to undermine democracy in the upcoming French elections in Europe, conceivably down the line, even in India. It's a challenge that he both presents to the world and to the U.S., and it's a challenge that he politically has to deal with, this challenge of Russian interference in elections.
Well, we'll follow what happens then. I have no words. But always good to have you on the show. Stephen Golub, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And one of the big things that America, of course, is looking at is the situation in North Korea. And amid the tension in the peninsula, one man is smiling, surrounded by cheering, clapping deputies. We're leaving you with images of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un surveying his army's live fire drills. Thanks for watching.